Hello everyone. In this lesson, we will create our local dev environment. So in our previous lesson, we downloaded and installed two things, VirtualBox and Vagrant. VirtualBox basically creates a super flexible mini computer nested inside our computer, and then Vagrant comes along and Vagrant turns that mini virtual machine into a local server that we can use to host local websites. Now it's important to point out that VirtualBox and Vagrant themselves have absolutely nothing to do with WordPress specifically. Vagrant is an empty canvas. So WordPress developers use it for WordPress, Ruby developers use it for Ruby, Node developers use it for Node. You get the idea. So Vagrant can't read our minds. We need to tell it what type of developer we are. And you and I are WordPress developers. Now remember from our last lesson, the metaphorical soil, water, and sunlight that WordPress needs? We basically need a recipe that lists those requirements, and then we'll give that recipe to Vagrant, and it will build us the perfect environment. Now I've already prepared a recipe like that for us. So all we need to do is go and download my recipe and then hand it to Vagrant. So in a new tab in your web browser, I want you to visit the following URL, github.com/learnwebcode/vagrant-lamp. If you want to pause the lesson right now so you can type out this URL, that's okay. Or if you look at the resources associated with this lesson, you should find a link to this page. Anyways, back to the task at hand, we want to download something from this page. So towards the right-hand side, we see this green clone or download button. So go ahead and click on that. That will open up this menu, and then we want to click this download zip button. Once the download completes, you should have a new file in your computer's downloads folder or wherever you chose to save the file to. So for example, on my computer, I will go into my downloads folder, and here we see that new file that we just downloaded. Its name is vagrant-lamp-master.zip. Our next step is to unzip or extract this file. If you're on Mac, you can double-click the file. Or if you're on Windows, you can right-click on the file, and then from the pop-up menu, there should be an extract option. Okay, but whether you're using Mac or Windows, once we extract that file, then we have this new folder named Vagrant Lamp Master. And if we take a look inside that folder, we should see additional folders named Fictional University, HTML, and a few other files. Now because our local dev environment is going to live within this folder, I don't want this folder to permanently live in my downloads folder. So if I go back a screen, I don't want this folder just sitting in downloads. I want it to live somewhere that feels a bit more permanent or convenient. So feel free to move it to your desktop or maybe to your documents folder or someplace like that, right? Personally, in my case, I'm just going to drag it to my desktop, so that it's super easy to find, super convenient. Just a quick random note, I know that on certain computers, when you extract a zip file, it creates a double nesting situation, where it creates the main Vagrant Lamp Master folder, and then directly inside that, there's another folder with the exact same name. So if your computer did that, just know that you don't need to keep that double nesting structure going on. You can just move the innermost nested folder named Vagrant Lamp Master to your desktop or documents or wherever you prefer. Okay, so on my computer, I moved it to my desktop. And now, why don't we give this folder a more intuitive name? So why don't we rename it to something like Local Sites or Projects? The name doesn't matter, it's just for our own mental organization. Because moving forward, this folder is where all of our local WordPress websites and any other PHP-based websites will live. So I'm going to rename it Local Sites. Okay, so we've got this folder, and inside it we have these files. Now the question is, how do we actually do something with these files? In particular, this file named Vagrant file. How do we tell Vagrant to create a local dev environment using this file as the recipe? Well, in order to do that, we are going to need to pretend that it's the 1980s. And what I mean by that is we need to open a command line. Okay, so what in the world is a command line? Well, it's a place where we can type and run commands. So this used to be the way that people did things on their computers before point-and-click operating systems became the standard. Now, I know that using a command line might seem crazy in the modern world, but trust me, knowing your way around the command line is actually a central part of being a professional modern web developer. Now, I realize the command line can be terrifying, but really it's only scary if you're all alone. And you are not alone. You've got me to tell you which commands to type out and why. So what I want to do right now is help you find the command line on your computer. It's a bit different depending on whether you are using Mac or Windows. If you're on a Mac, just look inside your Applications folder for another folder named Utilities, and inside Utilities there is an app named Terminal. Terminal is your command line. So throughout this course, whenever I say go to your command line, that means I want you to open the Terminal app. Now it's a bit different if you're on Windows. The command line that comes bundled with Windows is not perfectly suited for web development. So I recommend not using it and instead downloading another command line tool named Git Bash. It's free, it's lightweight, and it has every feature that we could wish for. So you might be wondering, how do I download and install Git Bash? Well, you just go to the official Git website. So that's git-scm.com. And then down here you can see it says downloads for Mac because I'm on a Mac at the moment. But obviously if you visited this website on a Windows computer, it would say downloads for Windows or downloads for PC. So go ahead and pause this lesson and download and install this Git program. Once the installation completes, then in your Start menu, under All Programs, you'll have a new program named Git Bash. So throughout the course, whenever you hear me say go to your command line, if you're on Windows, open up Git Bash. All right, now at this point, everyone should have access to a command line on their computer. Now let's get back to the task at hand. Remember, we want to tell Vagrant to use these files that we downloaded, these files that we moved to a convenient location. We want to tell Vagrant to use those files as the recipe for a new local dev environment. So in order to make that happen, let's jump over to a command line. And before we tell Vagrant to do its thing, let's first make sure that we have Vagrant installed on our computer by simply typing in the command line Vagrant and then a space and then -- or -- version and then press enter or return. So we can see that my computer responded by saying Vagrant and then a version number. So as long as you see something similar to this, it doesn't matter what the version numbers are. If you see something similar to this, that means you're in business, you're good to go. If instead you see something along the lines of command not found, that means you'll probably want to go back to the previous lesson and try downloading and installing Vagrant again. Okay, but if you see the version number here, that means you're good to go. And in that case, our next step is to navigate our command line to this folder that we set up earlier in this lesson, right? Because this folder contains the files that we want to use as our recipe. So back in the command line, let's type cd. This is a command that stands for change directory. And this lets us point the command line towards a specific folder. So cd and then a space, and then you could try to manually type out the path to the folder on your computer, but I find it's much easier to just type cd space and then simply drag the folder that you're interested in on top of your command line. You can see that that sort of types out the path to the folder for me, and then all I have to do is press enter or return. And now my command line is pointing towards my local sites folder. So that means the command line is looking inside this folder. And now all we need to do to tell Vagrant to use this file as the recipe is simply run the command Vagrant and then a space and then the word up. And then press enter. The Vagrant up command will tell Vagrant to begin creating our mini virtual computer that will be our local dev environment server. Now this initial creation of the local server can take some serious time. So once you type Vagrant up and press enter, you might want to go grab a coffee or get something to eat. Because depending on the speed of both your computer and your internet connection, it could take anywhere from 2 minutes to the better part of an hour or longer. But just be patient and know that you only ever need to do this once. Now you'll see all sorts of text flash by, screens and screens worth of text, and this is just Vagrant following the recipe and building the perfect local dev environment for us, step by step. You'll know that Vagrant is finally done when new text stops appearing and you see some sort of read above message. So I'd recommend pausing this lesson now and waiting for your Vagrant process to complete before resuming the lesson. Anyways, once it does complete, you'll probably be wondering, what did it actually just do? Well, our local dev environment server is now up and running. So check this out. If we go to our web browser and up in the URL address bar, let's try to visit the IP address of our local dev environment server. So type this in with me, 192.168.56.101. Cool, so we see this congratulations screen, and this means we are just one step away from our first local website. Now, this local dev environment server that we just created on our computer, it's very powerful. It can power hundreds of local websites. And that's what we're seeing when we connect to this IP address in our web browser. The IP address doesn't represent a website. It's simply the local server in general that can contain multiple websites. But in this course, we are only interested in one website, right? We want to create the fictional university website. And throughout this course, the URL that we're going to develop that website at is going to be fictional-university.test. Now that's not going to be a real domain that anyone in the world could visit. It's a fake local domain just for our use. Okay, but as of this moment, our computer has no way of knowing that it's not a real domain. So our final step, what we need to do right now is tell our computer that whenever we visit that URL, fictional-university.test, instead of going out onto the internet to try and find that domain, we just want our computer to look locally on our dev environment for the corresponding website. Okay, now you can tell your computer where to look for certain domain names by editing something on your computer called the hosts file. A computer's hosts file is located in different places depending on whether you're running Mac or Windows. I'll cover both bases, so first let me show you how to edit your hosts file on a Mac. To begin, jump back into your command line or the terminal and run sudo, which is sudo, and then a space, nano, N-A-N-O, and then a space, and then /etc/hosts, and then press enter. You'll need to type in the password for your user account on this computer. This is not to be confused with your iTunes or Apple account password. When you first bought the computer you're currently using, you probably had to set up a user account. Okay, so enter that password and then press enter. And now we are free to edit our hosts file. So all we want to do is add a new line down about here. So use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So you can push down several times on your keyboard, or you can push the right arrow on your keyboard. If you look really closely at this video, you can see that my cursor is moving. Okay, so now my cursor is on this line, which is where I want it to be. And remember, our goal is just to tell our computer that if we visit fictional-university.dev, we don't want to go out onto the internet to look for it. Instead, we want to look on our local dev server for that domain. So all we need to do is type out the IP address of our local dev server, which is 192.168.56.101. Then hit Tab on your keyboard, and then we just type out the domain that we're interested in, which is fictional-university.test. Okay, that's all we need to type. Now we just want to save this file. So hold down the Control key, not the Command key, but Control. And while you're holding down the Control key, simultaneously press the O key. O as in OK. And then just press Enter or Return. And finally, to close this text editor mode, we can just press Control and X. Okay, so now we're back to the regular command line. And now, back in our web browser, in the URL bar, we can visit fictional-university.test. Okay, and if you see a page that says Hello World in the very top left corner, that means you did everything right and you can celebrate. If instead you see some sort of error message, you probably just need to clear your web browser's cache and then completely close the web browser application and reopen it and then try visiting this URL again. Now, before I explain what this page means and why it's worth celebrating, I first want to show people who are using Windows-based computers how to edit their host's file. So if you're on Windows, go ahead and press the Windows key on your keyboard. And now it may not look like it, but you can actually just start typing in letters or words, and Windows will search through all of your available programs. So right after pressing the Windows key, then just start typing in Notepad on your keyboard. You should then see the Notepad program listed in front of you. Don't click on it normally. Instead, right-click on it, and then choose Open as Administrator. Once you're in Notepad, choose File, Open, and I want you to open a very specific file. Look inside your C drive, or whichever drive is your main operating system drive. Then go inside the Windows folder. Then go inside the System32 folder. Then go inside the Drivers folder. Then go inside the folder named etc. And in that folder, there should be a file named Hosts. Now, if you've navigated to the etc folder and you don't see a hosts file, be sure to change the file type that you're looking for from txt or text to all file types. You can usually change that option from a drop-down menu towards the right-hand side of the open screen. Anyways, once you've got that file open, all we need to do is add a new line at the very bottom of the file. So on a new line towards the bottom of the file, we're just going to tell our computer that when we visit fictional-university.test, our computer doesn't need to go out onto the internet to look for that domain. Instead, our computer should just look locally within our dev environment. So to do that, on a new line, let's just begin by typing the IP address of our dev environment server. So that's 192.168.56.101. Then press the Tab key and type fictional-university.test. Go ahead and save this file. And now, back in your web browser, up in the address bar, you should be able to visit fictional-university.test and see a page with nothing but Hello World in the very top left corner. If you see that, that means you did everything right and you can celebrate. If you don't see this, you might just need to clear your browser's cache, close your web browser and reopen it, and then visit the URL again. Now, I realize at first glance, an entirely empty page with just 2 words on it probably isn't very exciting. But what is exciting is if I tell you that this page, this Hello World page, is living in the exact environment that WordPress needs. Remember that metaphorical soil, sunlight, and water that WordPress needs? This placeholder page in this website lives in that exact environment. And that means that in our very next lesson, we are ready to install WordPress within our new VirtualBox and Vagrant environment. This should be a lot of fun, so let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then.